Bicycles have been part of British culture since Victorian times. And when the penny farthing came along in 1871, it marked a huge change for bicycle production in Britain.
Famed for its large front wheel, it was designed by engineer James Starley, one of the most successful bicycle inventors of the 19th century. His bikes are now huge collector's items.
Whichever era you grew up in, if you had a bike, you had freedom. And of course, we all remember our childhood days riding around with friends, perhaps pulling a few stunts or even doing a wheelie.
That's certainly true of bike superfan Mike O'Reilly. He currently has 55 bikes in his collection, and he's brought some along to show me. There may be one or two that you might recognise.
So I started collecting bikes in 2007. I was working away from home quite a lot and spend a lot of time in hotels and things and sort of go online and browse around and see what you can find. And I found there was quite a scene for like old bikes, sort of retro bikes and things. So I got a little bit of information, ended up going to an event, and I went with one bike and came back with 11.
And what was your first bike?
So the first bike I bought to start my collection was a Raleigh Vector. And I bought that in 2007. For £75. And I think the reason I bought that was because when they came out in, I think it was 85, I always wanted one, but my mum said I couldn't have one because I would have broke it. So once I bought that, it was a bike that I always wanted. I decided to focus a collection on bikes that I'd owned as a child. So the first bike I got was in 1983, and my parents bought me the Raleigh Mini Burner. My mum worked at Upton's department store at the time, and she paid £72 for the bike. But at the time, she was only earning £9 a week, so it was a lot of money to pay.
That is love, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a huge amount of money to pay for a bike at the time.
BMX stands for Bicycle Motocross. They first came onto the scene in America in the 1970s, inspired by motocross motorbikes, and were designed as a stepping stone to get children into the sport. By the 1980s, manufacturers in the UK were producing these bikes too, and they were all the rage. And of course, as Mike grew older, he needed a bigger and better BMX.
And this one I'd seen in my nana's catalogue, like the mail order catalogue type things. And I'd seen it, really wanted it, kept leaving it open on all the pages for parents to see and things. And yeah, I got this one for Christmas a few years later.
The BMX may have been the bike of choice during the 80s, but by the end of the decade, another bike was taking centre stage, the mountain bike. So, of course, Mike had to have one.
It was in 1989. I got the Raleigh Mustang that you see behind me here.
That's cool. How many gears has that
That's got 15 gears, so it's super fast.
Super fast.
That's what we thought when we were kids anyway.
And they've got another one here?
Yeah, technology moved on a little bit after I'd had that for a few years, and I wanted something a little bit better, a little bit lighter, a little bit more advanced, so I moved on to the Townsend next after that one.
Mike's love for bikes was shared by his granddad.
I used to buy and sell bikes. He fixed all the bikes in the estates for the children. And I used to stay there on a weekend. So my nana would pick me up from school and take me home. And I was quite eager to see what bikes he'd got during the week when I hadn't been there. And I went there one day and he had a red chopper.
This new edgy bike revived the UK's bike industry after a lull in the 60s, when four wheels became the transport of choice. But by the 70s, bikes were back with a bang, thanks to the chopper.
So why was the chopper such a successful bike?
It was such a different bike. Sort of chopper motorcycles were popular, and if you want to be really cool, you want the big handlebars and the big leather seat.
Like a Harley?
Yeah, like a Harley, exactly. And a really cool gear shifter and things like that. If you think about it, like the small wheel at the front, the big wheel at the back, there's been nothing really ever like that since the chopper came along. So, yeah, it's very iconic and still is to this day.
So it's a wonderful collection of bikes, and they're collectible, and of course they must have some considerable value.
I would say in this collection here, I would say the Tough Burner here, they've sort of really increased in price because they're so iconic. So a lot of people recognise them, so they're around about £1,000 now.
Are they really?
Really, yeah. And the bike that you see here, the Aero Pro Burner, that was like the top of the range burner at the time. That's 1984, and they're sort of £1,500 to £2,000.
£1,500?
Yeah, definitely.
So if you're going off looking for a chopper, what sort of value are we looking at?
Well, you would look at sort of a Mark I chopper in complete condition. You'd be looking at sort of £500 to £700.
Yeah. Easily.
And if it was in very good condition, sort of 1,000 to 1,500 very easily.
So if we're going to give somebody a tip to start collecting, what should they look out for?
I think to sort of keep it under control, you need to figure out why you want to collect them and what you want to collect. So for me, it was bikes that I had as a child. So I could look for those, I could focus on those. Otherwise, it's very easy to go down different routes and you end up with a shed full of bikes. The other thing as well would be to look at the condition of the bike. So if you get one that's really bad condition, you don't have the skills to do it, it can get very expensive if you have to get other people to do it for you.
Thanks, Mike. Fantastic collection. Now, it's time to get onto our bikes and ride over to Beverley for the auction.